Welcome to the Catholic Psych Show. Believe it or not, the following stories are connected. Russian bot farms, Iranians infiltrating our protests, an AI beauty pageant, and a comic book written by Whoopi Goldberg about menopause. Dr. Greg is lost in the metaverse as we speak. Subbing in for him today is our dear friend Jack Beers. Jack, how are you today?
I'm grateful to be here with you. I'm grateful that you invited me back after you watching Dr. Greg and I go bananas last time.
Yes.
I'm glad that you still decided to have me here.
Absolutely. I think some people think we look alike. There were some comments that were sent where some of the things that you said were mistakenly attributed to things that I might have said. But that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we're all kind of sort of white males with beards. I don't blame anyone for confusing us once in a while.
It's the father-son resemblance, you know.
That's right. That's right. You were and are still my supervisees. So it's like people becoming like their dogs. I remember when you came over to my house to visit, and you saw my English bulldog, and you're like, I get it.
Yeah, it looks like you.
Yeah. All right. So, anything you want to talk about? How are things going? Things good? Just with you?
Yeah. No, things are good. We had family in town.
Yeah.
And my wife's cousin, his kid had one of the rarest blood diseases you could possibly have.
Oof.
And she had this unbelievable, miraculous recovery. And she has to come back to Cincinnati every year, to Cincinnati Children's. And she's like a celebrity when she goes into the hospital, because it's, for her to be doing as well as she is, to be alive, let alone doing as well as she is. So it's been a good week celebrating like her being alive and being well. How about you? Did you have a good vacation? You feeling good?
It's fantastic. I had mentioned to Dr. Greg, I had a retreat. It wasn't so much a vacation. It provided plenty of opportunities to grow. It wasn't all that relaxing. I mean, there are moments of relaxation, but retreats are good for that. You have time to face life challenges and difficulties. And I did come back refreshed, so I'm ready to go. I'm ready to talk about the world and the world of the unreal.
Yeah, we're going deep into technology today. Which one of the AI fake, not real things do you want to start with?
Well, yeah, I think it's actually a bit broader than just technology. I think technology is going to be making things worse, but I want to start with, I think we're just coming off the heels of what I call hide and Biden, right? We're coming off the heels of at least members of the Democratic Party hiding the severity of the decline of President Biden's health, right? And the knock on the Republicans for years has been, well, in publicly Republicans support Trump, but privately people think he's a disaster. Well, the same thing has kind of happened with Biden. Like, it's coming out now that a lot of Democrats have known about his decline in health, but are publicly would go on CNN or wherever, the traditional news sources, and say things like, oh, he's as sharp as he's ever been, right? And so I was watching listening to this podcast about how the American public feels somewhat betrayed, even in that, like a centrist position. Republicans are proposing this narrative that Biden was feel betrayed by even the news media and Washington and the news media about the severity of his health issues. The liberal side is generally saying like it was one bad night. It was one bad debate. He's fine. It was a cold. It was traveling, whatever. But whatever. In general, there's a feeling of like, I can't trust. Like, I couldn't trust the Republicans. Now I can't trust the Democrats either, right? And then we have these news stories today. We have two news stories about one involving Russian bots, right? So the Fed shut down Russian AI bot farm that spread disinformation about Vladimir Putin. The Justice Department nailed a Russian disinformation bot farm powered by artificial intelligence. They took down 2 websites that disrupted nearly 1,000 bots that were on social media. I mean, some of this is really interesting that they like the level of detail it goes to this AI goes to in order to make the people seem real, right? Electronically created bots complete with pictures of smiling, clean-cut people purported to be Americans with names such as Sue Williamson. I haven't met a Sue Williamson. Ricardo Abbott. That's an interesting surname and first name, Ricardo Abbott, who were supposedly taking to social media sites such as X to extol on Putin's generosity and virtues. So there's that, and there's misinformation, disinformation, which is designed to influence public opinion on Putin there. And then we have in Iran, Iranian government agents have been attempting to influence American protests against the war in Gaza, according to U.S. intelligence. Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines stated that the Iranian actors have infiltrated the protest movement through social media and other cyber activities, posing as activists and funding public demonstrations. So they're in public demonstrations, they're on social media, they're on the internet, and Iran is trying to influence the way we look at the war in Gaza. So we have all this evidence of things being unreal. And before I turn it over to you, I think providentially, I was exposed to a clip last night with Keanu Reeves. And Keanu Reeves was a short. Love Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
Love Keanu Reeves. He's great.
Yeah.
And there's a short with him on YouTube. And he was recalling a recent story where he went to dinner at a friend's house, this director, and he has these two kids that were adolescents. And they had never heard of The Matrix, which is great, right? The kids had never heard of The Matrix. And he's explaining the premise of the story to them. And he was talking about how the protagonist is attempting to discover what's real and what's not real between these two worlds. And the kids said, "Why does it matter?" He said, "What do you mean? Like, why does it matter what's real?"
Whoa.
And Keanu's reaction, which was a little disappointing to me, was, "It was awesome. I'm so glad they said that." So my first question to you is, why does it matter what's real, Jack? A light one. Little softball right across the plate. Why does it matter what's real?
Wow. Dude, like, why does it matter whether I take the red pill or the blue pill, right? I was all ready to get after some of these things.
Oh, please do. I mean, if you had some thoughts leading into the particular stories, that's fine. But I'm just also thinking big picture, which we want to at least land the plane on before we shift to AI beauty pageants.
I also, at some point, so for you to percolate in the back of your mind, want you to answer the question of like, what happens when trust is eroded? Like, because you kind of opened up with that, and I think even just from like a psychological perspective, like you can see the symptoms of people when there's no trust. But I think it matters because of, I think it matters at least off the top of my head on two levels. Like one of the most interesting things to me of everything that's happened with Joe Biden is the reaction of the press. Oh yeah. So Joe Biden and in the press room, and his presidency and everything, like largely softballs. There's not necessarily been a ton of heat on Joe Biden over the course of his presidency. And there have been a number of things that you could look at and you could be like, yep, you probably deserve some heat for Afghanistan, for inflation, other things along those lines. Like not a ton of heat.
Project Bubble Wrap. Have you heard about Project
Bubble Wrap? Yeah. Okay. And then this happens and the press are so pissed.
They're angry.
They're so mad. They feel so betrayed
and deceived. Yeah. Yeah, I saw an interview with the White House press secretary, and they were asking her about a neurologist coming to see the president, a Parkinson's specialist.
Yeah.
And it was like all hell was breaking loose. And she was trying to explain, like, this is normal routine to have a neurologist to come see the president. And he's like, no, you're lying to us. You've been lying to us. The reporter was angrily yelling at the press secretary.
Yes. And they've had, for the most part, very pleasant exchanges. And then she basically shuts it down. And she tries to get on a moral pedestal and be like, I try to keep things cordial. You guys be respectful. And they're like, heck no, you lost the chance at respect when you have essentially lied to us. Because that Parkinson's doctor, I think, has been there many, many times and then comes out and is like, he has Parkinson's. And it's like, who am I going to believe? Am I going to believe this doctor who it has been documented? It's in the log. That he's been there multiple times being like, yeah, he's got Parkinson's, or am I going to believe this situation? And to me, that's one of the base layers of why it matters, because you can't help being pissed when you actually discover what's true, when
Yeah.
you have built your whole world around what's false. Because
Right.
it makes it so angry because you live based off of a certain set of beliefs and assumptions. You have to,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And then when someone comes in and erodes that,
Yeah.
uh, and basically makes you seem like you've been a liar or a
Right.
cheat or bad
Right.
at your job,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
that's part of why it matters, because it hurts you. It literally hurts you because eventually the truth emerges.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's complicated in our clinical work. We highlight the subjective, right? If I'm working with a couple, uh, we often see we often see that when you hear both sides of a story, that there are two legitimate, valid perspectives and angles into the same story, right? And part of helping a couple grow in connectedness is allowing space for the other person's perspective, like allowing space for the filter through which they see a situation. And you see this at a cultural level when you hear things like, well, what is my truth?
Yeah.
The problem is that, like, if that's the only truth and there's no objective truth, then that's an issue. And this is what John Paul II attempted to philosophically integrate, which is that phenomenology, the subjective truth, my experience, me, what I have going on, with objective truth. So this is St. Thomas Aquinas and Thomism, right? And so it's the subjective and the objective. And so like his idea was to meet people where they are in their subjective experience, but then from an evangelization perspective, move them towards what is objectively true. And then we would want to do that in our psychological work too. So just like individually, we have misperceptions, we have assumptions about other people that may not be true, and we want to help people realize like their own biases, their own unconscious projections, to help them get more in touch with reality. At a cultural level right now, it's as if no one is standing up for what is objectively true. The kid in the dinner party doesn't really understand. Why does it matter what's true? Is that it's human to pursue what is true. It's like your point. I'm upset when I don't hear the truth. Like, we are built for truth, the person of truth,
Hmm.
right? Christ is truth, right? I am the way, the truth, and the life, and we are built for eternal, perfect communion with him. And so no matter what kind of philosophical, conceptual way you want to paint things, right? Like, you're going to be upset if you are betrayed and someone isn't offering what is true to you. So even those teenage kids might think, they may live in the world of the unreal, especially now with the internet and, social media and filters on phones and video games and, CGI. They live in that world. But day to day, if someone lies to them, they're going to be angry. So it's like they're not actually, like, it's conceptual, it's not experiential. We all know that the truth is really important to us because without truth, we can't experience love. If I can't trust what you're saying is true, then there's nothing between us. There's no love between us. And so with this all this, I mean, this is at an individual level, but we're talking about the macro and the micro here. Like, without knowing what is true, it's very disorienting. It can lead to despair. I mean, I think of Pontius Pilate. What is truth? Like, ultimately this leads to nihilism, doesn't it? Which is
Well,
despair, no religion. It's just awful, the temptation.
it also leads to killing Christ, right? Killing Christ in the culture, killing Christ in your life. Like
Right.
it leads to that if there's not something holding you. I think it's also sometimes it's useful to look at like a micro human example
Yeah.
and then expand it to the macro. So like I knew this woman in my hometown who like got married young, like graduated college, got married young, started having kids, and was doing it all for um because she thought it was what she was supposed to do.
Right.
So she married the person she thought she was supposed to marry. She had the kids because she thought she was supposed to have the kids.
Yeah.
She wakes up one day and she's like 40 and she's looking on Facebook and she's seeing the lives of these other women.
Mm-hmm.
And she essentially decides that she's going to leave her marriage, leave her kids, go get a career,
Yeah.
go start being sexually active and exploring relationships, right? So she does this. And based on this perceived value that she sees based on Facebook, right? And this subjective thing that this life of travel and independence and making money and being in,
Freedom to do what I want rather than free to do what I should do.
right,
Yeah.
and loose relationships on loose terms, right?
Yeah.
She spends about 5 years doing this. She doesn't get invited to her daughter's high school graduation. She doesn't have any meaningful relationships. Like the money, the success, everything is hollow. She's drinking herself into oblivion, and she's pissed because she's like, I got sold a bag of magic beans that didn't do anything, right? And she's livid, and
Yeah.
she's self-loathing, and she's terrible. Okay, like that's what does that have to do with anything that we're talking about?
Well, that to me seems to be two sets of problems, though. Like the first problem she had was not being honest with herself, exploring knowing herself, like caving to the pressures of societal norms and maybe,
Familial.
like, yeah, making commitments before she was ready to freely choose those commitments, right? And then she thought the answer to that was no commitments,
Right.
no responsibility. It was like a pendulum swing.
Totally. So she gets sold this bag of goods, right? And it turns out to be horrible, and it ruins her life. Literally ruins her life. There's possibility for redemption, all that stuff. Like I know that, but she is miserably drinking herself to death. Like okay, like look at what's happening with the college protests on Palestine and this whole idea that there are. I know it's
this is quite the leap.
I know. No, it's not. It's really not, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So like I could look at what this woman was doing and I'd be like, it's a disaster. Like this is going to be a disaster. This is going to be horrible. You look at like these protests around pro-Palestine. You look at like France and how the election in France, there's not a single French flag in the celebration of the.
Oh, I never thought about that. That's such a good point. Yeah.
Of the election, right? There's not a single French one. If you listen to the chants in the streets, it's down with France, down with capitalism, down with all this stuff, right? Ugh. And these, like, you have all these people who are like, I am pro-Palestine and I'm anti-Israel. And this is not a rant about Israel's conduct in the war. Like, we can leave that aside. Like, pro-Palestine, having Iranian influences, which is pro-Hamas. It's like, it's a bag of nonsense. Like if you actually understood and you actually could see what was true about what Hamas is vying for and what they're hoping for, and then you pitted that up against what these students conceivably believe about the human race, right? They do not line up. It is not true.
You're saying they don't know. They don't know. It's disinformation.
The right and let's say like pro-Palestine and Palestine takes over and Israel is nothing. In about 3 seconds, they're going to wake up in horror at the world that exists and be like, "This is not what I was protesting for." And you'll be totally lost and you just be like, "What was all that for? What was I doing? Can I trust and believe in anything anymore?" And like it's the same thing. One's happening on an individual basis and one's happening on a large basis. And it even makes sense on the Joe Biden thing because it's like with your eyes, you know he's deteriorating. But you're being told this nonsense and then you believe the nonsense and then you see it for your own eyes again. And it's like,
well, let me ask you, just going back to the Palestinian question for a moment. Do you believe Hamas is a terrorist group? Maybe that's too an oversimplification. I guess what I'm getting at is it's interesting to me that college students are protesting the war. And just from a psychological perspective, I remember how unified the United States was, generally speaking, for right or wrong, against the Middle East at 9/11.
Sure.
And that's not to like, what's the word, like overly simplify what the Middle East is. But, like I said, for better or worse, there was an association of anti-Muslim sentiment in the United States, which was highly problematic. Obviously, there's good people who are Muslims in the world, who are striving the best they can based on what they've been given in terms of faith to be good people, right? Um, and in every nation, there are good people, but just the association in the American mind that was there after 9/11, like we were all sort of unified. The college students today were not there.
Sure.
like I just wonder if they had experienced that, which to me seemed like yesterday, if there would be this push, a pro-Palestinian push in the same way.
Yeah, I don't know because like I could find fault in the way that both sides are conducting the war.
You mean Israel and Palestine?
Yeah, but
Well,
on a
of course, of course. I'm just saying on a visceral psychological level,
sure,
American sentiment about the Middle East has changed.
but on a fundamental level, one side wants to wipe the other side out in its entirety.
Mhm.
And the other one essentially just wants to be left alone. Like ultimately. Like if you didn't blow their people up, they're not Israel isn't necessarily trying to expand. They haven't tried to expand anywhere in a really, really, really long time.
Yeah.
They want to exist freely and safely. Uh, like that alone ought to, and it's democratic, right? To a certain extent. Like it's republic, I guess I should say. Like that alone would make you lean in one direction. And then you throw Hamas in, which is a terrorist organization. Palestine as a state is not necessarily like everyone in Palestine is not a terrorist, but Hamas as a state is as an entity, like they have terrorist intentions with
Yeah.
terroristic um uh uh actions.
Designs, yeah, and behaviors, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying is true. I think that most people who lived and breathed uh,
The 9/11
9/11
experience. Yeah.
aren't having the same visceral reaction. But at the same time, the whole pro Palestine thing, you'll see a lot of people who experience 9/11 with Palestinian flags. You see a lot of
Mm.
graduates, like master's, doctorate level graduates at these graduations
Yeah.
wearing Palestinian flags.
That's fair. Yeah, and yeah, there's a legitimate position out there that I think, well, le- legitimate. It's a position out there that holds that the Palestinian people have been vastly mistreated over the last even hundreds of years, or at least
For sure.
100 years, roughly 100 years.
For sure. One thing I want to roll back to with you on this trust thing from like an American perspective.
Hmm.
So like I love history. I studied history like I was a historian, and the way that historians talk about American public trust is that
Yes.
the line of demarcation was Vietnam.
Yes.
That it went civil rights, Vietnam, Nixon, all in one massive cluster.
Hmm.
And trust in American authorities, in governmental authority, has been eroding ever since. And then there are certain other like big watermarks that change things.
Well, I think I might go back a little further than that. I think with television allowing access to what war was like in World War II started. It was like sort of the first domino of people being anti-war, and like everyone was a support of World War II and defeating fascism and Hitler. But when people saw actually what was happening in war, and then soldiers came back, and you had shell shock and all this stuff that is leading up to Vietnam, and everything going on in the Cold War, I think people really started to push back. And I also think distrust like, I guess my big picture question, maybe you're getting to this, is it that the government is suddenly lying to us? Or did we just never know it? Like with technology being introduced, are we just now getting access to something that's always been the case?
I mean, I think that the public being informed on what's happening is not that being a problem is not a new problem. It's not a late 1950s, early 1960s problem that just emerged. Like Vietnam itself,
Yeah.
when they were deciding to do it, I forget the senator's name, but he literally said to the president, he's like, we've got to scare the hell out of the American people to make this happen. We've got to make stuff up in order to scare them enough to get into this. Because America had a long history of isolationism and
Yes.
anti-war, right? And
War is all the way over there. There's all these problems over there. I'm like, I just need to
I'm
go to
good.
the grocery store and get some milk. Like,
Yes.
yeah.
So, but you have institutional, or you have governmental distrust. And then you have like a couple of other high water marks. The impeachment of Clinton
Yes.
had to do with that. The sexual abuse crisis in the church, institutional erosion for
Right.
sure.
I think a lot of people push back against Bush with weapons of mass destruction that were never found. Yeah.
Right. Iraq war, all this stuff. And it's all institutional. But all the while we have things like we have Watergate.
Yeah.
In which it's journalists who expose it. And they're the truth tellers, right?
Right.
And then you have Spotlight, right? Truth tellers.
Now we have cable news.
Right? We have investigative journalism. There were no weapons of mass destruction. You know what I mean? And now you're sitting here as an American and you're like, what in the world do I trust? I knew I couldn't trust the leaders. Now I can't trust the people providing information for me. I go to the public forum, social media.
Yeah.
I can't trust the information that's being shared with me there. For all I know, this is a Russian bot or Iranian plant.
Well, I do think that's why you have independent news media showing up on the internet as an alternative to cable news and traditional news. I mean, ranging from, whatever you want to say about them, like a Joe Rogan or there's like the Daily Wire. There's Russell Brand. like there's a lot of different takes, and people can have different opinions about the Tucker Carlson. And I'm naming some conservative ones, but there's liberal versions of this too, where it's like, okay, we don't trust those people. Now we're the new people you can trust. In some ways, that's what we're doing right now. It's us that you can trust, viewers. We're the ones.
What's interesting about what you're saying is it's distilled down to individuals.
Yeah, it's getting smaller and smaller. Yeah.
Right. It's like, I am going to trust that Joe Rogan is going to curate for me the true expert in a particular area in order for me to get my information that's appropriate.
It becomes very conspiratorial very quickly.
Very
conspiracy theory. There's this deep government,
So where you can't trust the New York, like before it was like, I trust the editorial of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, and now you're like, well, there's this independent scholar from Princeton who posts stuff on Twitter on foreign policy. That's my foreign policy guy. And then I listen, and all of a sudden you're like buffeting these individuals, searching for any means of true information about what's happening. And it's literally one way that we could look at it. If I want to look at it from a positive perspective, it's like, it's eroding any delusions we've ever had that we can trust anybody other than God. You know what I mean?
Like, I like to think I'm trustworthy. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I like to think that I'm pretty straightforward and honest and direct and trustworthy. No, I know what you mean. I like, full stop. I mean, anybody can fail you in this life, right?
Yeah.
And like the things that we take on faith to be certain with certainty is our theological doctrine and statements. And, we have members of the church who fail us, but, we can have trust in the teachings of the Catholic Church to never fail us. Christ said, it's a human institution. Okay, Peter, but it's my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So we can trust that. But there are good people out there. I think when you bring it all the way back around to the individual level, it's like, say we get hurt in our childhood, say we have untrustworthy parents or untrustworthy experiences with peers or siblings. And then that becomes our norm for like what we assume to be true about all kinds of other relationships in our life. We're going to assume that everyone's criticizing us, doesn't see us, puts pressure on us, whatever. I mean, we can go through the whole list of psychological interpersonal ways in which we're hurt. Right. But our work, this is what we do. We say, like, look, I may not perfectly be able to love you like God does in a way that your parents did not. But I'm going to really try my hardest. I'm going to fall short. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to apologize for the mistakes that I make. Hopefully we can repair. We talk about rupture and repair. Like when I screw up, even in our therapeutic relationship, if I
Yep.
misperceive you or I hurt you in some way, I'm bound to because of original sin, but I'm still like well-intentioned and we can work through this tension. So, this is the corrective emotional experience. So I don't know. I'm like, it's a healthy way of looking at our, not only others, but ourselves when we allow space for good intentions, good people, and we live in shades of gray. Like one of the biggest dangers psychologically is black and white thinking, right?
Mm.
When we idealize someone, they're the greatest ever, or demonize them, they're the worst ever. The reality is they're gray. They may be like not all people. Some people might be really striving for evil, but for the most part, there's people that love you, that are striving to do what is good and what is good for you and love you and for what's your best interest. And they screw up once in a while. And that's like a realistic view of other people. And it's okay if you can sit with that both and tension. And then you look at yourself that way, which is, hey,
Mm.
I did an awesome job on this task, but I got some help. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. It's like preventative against pride. And then on the other side, it's like, oh, I screwed up. Am I the worst ever? Am I so terrible? No one loves me. I'm a failure. No, I tried my best. It's all right. I can learn from this and move on. So, like that shade of gray vision of reality, I think we have to look at people as striving to do good, generally striving to do good, but they make mistakes.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's fair. I think if I was going to be more precise, it would be like from an authority perspective. Like
Mm,
it's a good thing to remember that um, uh, that ultimately what you're striving for and ultimately what you're seeking can only be found in that relationship. It can
yeah.
only be found in that relationship with God.
Yes.
But you're right. I certainly took it too far. But I think what's interesting also about what you shared, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is like trusting in yourself and trusting in your own parts.
Yeah.
I actually watched. I went to Inside Out 2 last night, and
I feel like I have total FOMO right now because everyone's saying how wonderful it is, and I haven't seen it yet. And
well,
telling
I
you,
would love your take on it once you do see it because it's also, from a creative standpoint, it is a perfect movie.
hmm,
There is no fat. There is
the
no
first the,
fluff.
the first one was pretty good.
The first one was really good. It was really solid. This movie is, but it was like they went on with they tried this, but it was a dead end. They tried that, but it was a dead end. Like, yeah, it was great. It was probably like 20 minutes, a little bit lengthy. This one
Yeah,
is crisp. I mean, it is flawless. There's no fat, there's no extra anything. Amazing.
yeah,
But there's this aspect of it where uh, there's a trade of power between joy and anxiety in these
mm.
different parts within the script.
Within the self, the two
Within the
parts.
self, within the
Yeah,
self, joy is kicked out, essentially, is
um,
cast
it makes me
cast away.
sad already.
Yeah, really sad.
Yeah,
And anxiety takes over. And anxiety has a lot of big early wins. And then anxiety without a parent, is wrecks the
blended,
car,
gets blended.
gets blended and wrecks the car, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And and joy, as part of the movie, sort of like comes back and has this maturity,
Hmm.
and instead of eye for an eye and being like, we can never trust anxiety ever again, like seeks to integrate anxiety into the self for its usefulness.
Appropriate fear of things we should be scared of.
It's like, oh crap, I forgot I have a Spanish test tomorrow. Which is
Right,
literally the example, right? Like,
right.
anxiety should provoke me to go, oh, I better go study.
Yeah, yeah. We talk about like the optimal level of anxiety. Like if you don't have enough, you don't do anything. But if you have too much, you're paralyzed. It's like a bell
Yes.
curve. Yeah.
Yes. And being able to watch watch the main character start to learn to trust her different parts
Of
and
herself,
not
yeah.
try and cast them out of the family was visually so powerful, because
Yeah,
I've also noticed in myself, like, I'll not trust parts of myself. If
mhm.
they steer me wrong, I
There's
will
no bad
be gun shy.
there's no bad parts. We should say too that, like, the Inside Out films are based on a psychological theory called parts theory, internal family systems, and we do incorporate that into the Catholic psych model. We don't entirely operate from that space. It's kind of subsumed under interpersonal work, and if anyone's interested, you can learn more about Catholic psych or get mentorship. But we do really believe in a lot of the principles that are laid down in those films. So that's awesome to
Yep.
hear that there was a nice visual representation of that.
Yes. Yes. It was really good. What do you think about Catherine's comment here? I feel like this is why we need to seek formation in small, real Christian Catholic communities. So when the world is the world, our world doesn't fall apart. We have fellowship in Christ.
Um, what do I think? I think it's I think that is a great point within measure. I think that taken to extreme, you can create this bubble of insulation in which, I mean, in like the most extreme would be like a cult or something, right? Or like there are these break off like Catholic Christian communities that are like separated from the church, for crying out loud, you know. Um, I'm not going to name any, but I know some. Uh, but I mean, I think there is a risk. There is a risk of this is a delicate balance of like you do want Christian fellowship. You do want people who share values with you, so you feel less alone in the world, and that you can are moving. They're rowing in the same direction, right? They're moving in the same direction as you. You're living a shared life, and you can connect on things that are really important to you that you can't share with someone who doesn't have those same values. But I also have a part of me who's my show, the Catholic Sinner Show, is designed to help. I mean, I'm a middle child, right? So being a middle child, unity is really important for me. Like I see both sides always, like I always see both sides. I've been already been mistaken here for being like this liberal on the show because I'm like saying, well, the Democrats might see it this way. It doesn't mean I'm liberal. It's just like I can see both perspectives because I want unification. Christ said this, right? I want them all to be one as you and I are one, Father. So,
Yeah.
so the thing that I caution against is like this idea that it's like the Catholics or the Christians, and then there's the world. It's us and those sinners. Like, hold up, you just tripped yourself up by framing it that way because you're a sinner too.
Hmm.
And there's lots of really good people out there that are, maybe have been hurt, have been wounded. Christ died with tax collectors. Let's not forget. They're hurt, they're wounded, they haven't been exposed to the fullness of truth. I mean, how many people out there that aren't Catholic that really know what the Catholic Church teaches? A pretty small percentage, like a very small percent. People don't know what the Catholic Church teaches. They take it on word of mouth, and there's all these kind of like false truths, and it's just not true. So it is good in some sense to have a Christian community, but I would not want that to create a division between us and the world, because we're called to go into the world, be in the world, but not of the world.
I kind of look at Catherine's point as like, this is why it's essential to have a secure base. A secure
Yes,
base as an individual, a secure base as a family unit, a secure base as a community. And so that you are then able to go out into the world. And I feel like that's I'm also a middle child, and I'm like, let me find the best in this
us,
comment, which I think is the
us,
spirit, even the
we're
second
the
comment.
we're the fence sitters,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah. I mean,
moderate fence
even
sitters.
I'm
Lukewarm.
comfortable last week when Dr. Greg is like, these idiots, how are these people this stupid? Like,
Well,
you know,
he's a firstborn. He gets the views though, which is great.
he does,
Um,
he does. But I
yeah,
think it's like secure base to go out. It's like secure base to insulate versus secure base to go out and to
I
bring
like that.
in and to
Absolutely.
bring about.
That's basic attachment theory, right? Like you have the secure base. Your parents are the secure base. If I need help, if I trust that they can help me, and I sort of internally take them with me. It's like the strange situation experiment. If anybody's ever heard of that, it's the basis for attachment theory. There's kids that are like the level of secure attachment is reflective in how they search the room around them. and whether or not they go out and play and deal with new, like, foreign experiences. And if things go wrong, can they look back to mom and dad and in that secure base that can help them? And if they feel securely attached, then they're able to go out, right? And so, yeah, like on a micro level and a macro level, the more we have that Catholic community as a secure base, it allows us to go out into the world in a safe way. All right, let's transition here because I don't want to go this whole discussion. I don't know if we're going to get to Whoopi Goldberg comic books, but let's. This next topic, we're going to need all of our female viewers to chime in because, like, we're gonna broach this in fear and trembling. I'm sure this is a very delicate topic, and know that we are cautiously, gently talking about this.
I think there's a way. I read this article and I was absolutely irate.
All right, okay. Let me tell what the article is.
Can I tell the audience about this article?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. Because maybe irate is too strong, absurd. So there was this contest to have the world's first Miss AI beauty pageant. And I know we're going to talk about the beauty pageant and deal with all of that delicately.
Yes.
My struggle with this particular article is the manner in which it is written. Speaking about the AI contestant as if the AI contestant is in fact a real person with a real platform, with real things to say and real influence. So here's what they had to say. Let me just get to this point.
I have it here if you want to pull it.
So Layla is an activist.
Kenza Laylee.
Kenza Laylee. Okay, thank you. Laylee is an activist and influencer with more than 193,000 followers on Instagram. Her engaging content is closely tied to Moroccan society, and that her goal is to contribute to the empowerment of women in Morocco and the Middle East, while also bringing much needed regulation to the influencer market. What? What? Why in the world? And there's several examples of this.
She's not real.
In the world are we speaking about this person as if this is a real human being?
Yes.
Were you struck by that at all?
Well, when I first read it, I couldn't tell if they were talking about the coder or the designer of the winner or the winner itself, as if she was a person.
They fluctuate.
Yeah, I know.
They fluctuate.
Yeah, she impressed judges with her knowledge on algorithms and coding. The event aimed to challenge traditional beauty standards and celebrate intellect and technological prowess. She hopes to use her platform to promote gender equality in STEM fields. The pageant highlighted the intersection of technology and beauty in contemporary society. I would love to see if the programmers behind this contest were predominantly male or female. So, like, who is establishing what the standard of beauty for an AI beauty pageant is?
Yes.
I want to here's another quote. While the pageant, one of our staff members at CatholicPsych, a woman, gave her take first, and I think it's actually fair to begin our conversation about the contest with her perspective, because we are not women. While the pageant showcases, this is a quote from the article first. While the pageant showcases an impressive fusion of technology and beauty, a competition of this nature does represent the risk of further exacerbating unrealistic beauty standards through now computer-generated perfection. It may be a leap forward for technology, but the contestants in Miss AI and their capacity curated bodies and lives can set toxic expectations and standards for real women and society as a whole. By the way, the other half of this, which we may not get to, is Whoopi Goldberg saying this is a real woman. I'm going to do I'm going to have a comic book about a woman who is going through menopause, and she's embracing the superpowers of going through menopause. Like, completely opposite take on feminine beauty. Okay, so, but here's the quote from our staff member. If she pops up somewhere around in my computer, I'll actually cite her, but I don't want to cite her without her permission. But she said, thoughts on this for me as a woman that no one asked for. She's very funny. This is so crazy to me. The fact that they are hosting AI pageants with computer generated perfect looking women is so wild, and sets this even more super unrealistic standard for how women should look. And they're not even real women. It's also wild and kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
Is that how you feel about the pageant itself? Or are you like pro AI pageant? Let's do it.
No, I think at a fundamental level, reason why I started it the way that I did is like, this is not a real person.
It's not a real person.
And maybe I should start at the meta of like aesthetic based pageantry is
like not even AI, just regular Miss America.
it's just absurd. Like I really feel like we should have moved beyond this as a culture and as a society. There's no value. There's no real value. Now, I think people do good with it. I think winners of pageants have done a lot of good with it.
Sure.
But I think that if we want to promote women in STEM, there are other, better, more useful, less counterproductive means to promote women in STEM.
Yeah.
Maybe that's crazy male brain, but
yeah, you know what I was thinking too is so we do have there's studies out there that show that like there's somewhat of a consensus around what is aesthetically beautiful in people, right? There's like themes of symmetry and like a lack of blemish. There's like a platonic ideal of the perfect person, which I think a lot of these AI generations are attempting to capture. But also, it's interesting, it's not just like they try and humanize the person. It's like it's a beautiful woman like on a train and she's like reading, it's like they try and make it more personal. And what always struck me is what this misses is that there's no such thing as someone that is beautiful in a snapshot. There's no such thing. So everyone, I don't want to make this a universal truth, but I'd say it's fairly common. I think most people can identify this. Probably men, well, I won't even get into genders, but just a human experience of seeing someone that you are physically attracted to at first glance, and then they start talking.
Okay.
And then it's dispelled very quickly, that physical attraction. Suddenly, when you actually get to know who they are, it's gone. And the other experience too, where it's like, I may not be physically attracted to someone at first glance, but when I get to know them, suddenly they're beautiful. I mean, this is to me is feminine beauty. It's not just like beauty is only skin deep and like, let's not be superficial, but it's like literally the beauty of a woman rests on her body, right? Like the body makes visible the invisible. It's very sacramental. It's why you can look at Mother Teresa and like, she's gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
You could just like, there's just joy emanating from her and beauty emanating from her. And like, even in the world of pornography, right? It's fantasized, imagined ideas of who this person is. It's not the real person. You're not taking a porn star home to mom for dinner, right? It's who I'm projecting my fantasy around I'm projecting a certain personhood on who they are, which is like just contradicts the idea that a snapshot photo expresses beauty. Like so an AI generated ideal, like there's already psychological projection and my own stuff. That's why people are attracted to so many different kinds of people, right? Like different body types, different heights, different hair colors, different cultures. Like it's all a real psychological experience. I won't get into like how we marry our parents right now. That's a whole nother topic, but like, it stems from our psychological experience in terms of what is actually attracted to us. So the whole premise that there can be an AI generated beauty contest is nonsense. It's even a AI generated photo and you find that woman attractive, like it proves the whole point. Like you're making up who that person is. And if you're a single person and you're like trying to pursue a spouse, it's actually frustrating because that person's not real. Like with the attraction, with the desire comes subtle, if you can explore yourself well enough, a frustration that it's not real. The same thing happens with pornography too. It's like not a real relationship. It's not real communion. It's not truth. Going all the way back to our first point, there's nothing real about it.
Yeah. Well, it's like both our wives are pregnant right now, right? And it's like
Very.
yeah, very pregnant. And it's like how like my wife is like, my body is so different. How could you find me beautiful? How could you find me attractive? And it's
Mm.
like, how do I get out of your brain all of the terms and conditions that have been infused into your mind on what a
Oh,
requirement for beauty
oh.
is?
Poor women today. It's so awful what they have to deal with in terms of these standards of beauty and stuff.
It's
Have you?
like,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, it's like it's so unbelievably difficult to even, from a male perspective, for me to even describe, like, okay, what is beauty and what is attraction?
Mhm.
It's like so much more attracted to you right now in this moment than when I first saw you, because of all the stuff between first seeing you and now.
Yes.
And all, like, that is what yields attraction. And it has, and it that's why it's so ridiculous to call it an AI beauty contest as opposed to um, like a technology challenge.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the danger. If these AI images become virtual reality in which someone's like dating an AI girlfriend, it becomes like it's not only the lived experience with someone, you lose that, but like you're not accepting the full span of how hard it is to be in a relationship with someone, right? It's like, oh, this person is designed to like serve me. This AI generated person is designed to serve me whatever I want, which sooner or later will be unsatisfying.
Yeah.
You lose the challenge of the difference between the sexes and everything associated with that. It's not real. I Thinking back to what we were saying about the impossible standards of beauty. Have you seen this movement, the about eyebrow blindness? Have you heard of this?
No, no.
This is great. I was talking to someone about it. Uh, a friend of mine. There's this. I don't know if it's a TikTok trend or a social media trend, but these women are looking back at earlier images of themselves, and there are so many different variations of their eyebrows, and they're seeing that like they were eyebrow blind at the time because they were going with that current trend of eyebrow formation. You know, the formation is not the word, but shaping, eyebrow shaping, and they're starting to realize like actually I need to be looking at what is the best eyebrow for my face, not what is the current trend in eyebrows. I feel this way about my hair, you know, or my facial hair. It's like I'm not going with current hair. It's like I'm trying to work with whatever I have. I, I can't like I don't have the freedom to style my hair in a way that I just want to style it. I don't have opinions on like abstract haircuts. It's like, well, this will make my chin a little bigger if I do this, or maybe I can cover a little hairline over here if I swoop it this way. You know, it's like you just like like it's nothing wrong with wanting to look good, but I don't know, eyebrow blindness. I think it's funny.
Yeah, it is. I hadn't heard of this before.
Mm,
Um, but I remember someone close to me who got caught up in that whole time period when you would get rid of and then have your eyebrows drawn on.
yeah,
And I remember finding it absurd at the time. I was like a teenager, and this person, I saw them with a kid, and the kid basically was like, um, "Did you use a crayon on your face?"
out of the mouths of babes.
Right? And it was just like, yes, it looks like you drew with a crayon on your face. And it's this made up, absurd thing for women that women have to handle, that women have
Yeah,
to deal with, that men do not have to handle. Like, look at me right now. You could go to a minus the facial hair because I couldn't grow it. You could go back to me 20 years ago, and this is my hair, my shirt, right? Like
Yeah.
I look exactly the same. Obviously I look older, but like my style, my hair, and not a single person has commented on the shirt I wear or the hair that I have in 20 years.
Well, it's kind of a privilege in a way, you know?
Yeah, it's such a gift.
Yeah, I feel bad. I feel bad for women. We have some comments on Instagram here. Chloe Smith says it's essentially an online art contest. Very odd. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of positioned as like demonstrate your skills in AI proficiency.
Yeah, give it
But
a different name.
yeah, it's true. All
I
right,
think we'd
we
feel a
actually,
lot different.
I think so. Let's hop into Whoopi Goldberg quick. We might have a minute here, so we all might have our opinions on the host of The View, Whoopi Goldberg, which I am praying for her because I have heard through back channels that she is loves The Chosen and is sympathetic to a Christian worldview, and I think she's on the path. But today, we're going to talk about her new comic book entitled The Change. It's published by Dark Horse Comics. If anybody knows about the world of comic books, this is the company that brought us Spawn from the 90s. It's kind of like it's an alt comic book company. So you have Marvel; those are the big superheroes that everybody typically knows about: the Avengers and Captain America and Spider-Man. Then DC is like Superman, the Flash. There's that world, and then Dark Horse is like dark. that's the point. So The Change, the name of the comic, features a 72-year-old black woman who gains extraordinary powers after a visit to her gynecologist. The story explains themes of empowerment and addresses issues of aging and societal expectations. Goldberg, an avid comic book fan, collaborated with Jamie Paglia, co-creator, yada, yada, yada. Comic book aims to offer representation and a fresh perspective in the comic book world. I mean, this is the kind of thing that could turn into a movie. Goldberg cited a scene from the book to explain. She's in the middle of an argument with her husband, and he's irritating the poo out of her. Then the husband begins to get hot because Frost is basically cooking him. Frost is the main character. Goldberg explained, adding that at that point in The Change, the hero doesn't know she has the powers. She transfers her heat to him. Well, she does what all superheroes do when you stop talking. They move you. So, in some ways, this book is like a celebration of menopause and the reality of what it means to be a woman. I think it's minimizes the suffering that comes along with menopause and the pain and the difficulty and the moods and the hot flashes and everything else. And it's certainly looking at the world in terms of power and hierarchy rather than beauty.
Yeah, just to give a hot take, I try not to judge too hard the first forays into
Art. Yes.
on topics that need to be discussed that are not discussed.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
And so like I think that if I read the book, if I read the comic, there'd be a lot I'd struggle with, especially the portrayal of men.
Yeah, I'm mad at my husband, so I'm going to use my superpowers to roast him. It's like,
yes,
power and division. That's not a good message.
Right. And dominance and other things along those lines. I'm probably not going to love the themes.
Yeah.
But I could see value of being like, let's talk about some of the good
Definitely
that can come from menopause. Let's talk about some of the beautiful aspects of menopause. There's obviously a lot of challenges and suffering, and it's like the number one thing is hot flashes or whatever.
Yeah.
So I try not to judge that stuff too harshly.
I like that.
I hope that it produces the fruit of multiple or an oncoming influx of resources for women who are going through that phase in order to find all parts are good, all phases are good.
Meaning, right? God put menopause into our experience and andropause for men. It's where men lose their testosterone, and in menopause, women lose their their estrogen, and it's sort of like a return to more of that childlike state that is changed during the adolescent period. And it's painful and difficult in some ways, but there is a value in it, and I think both psychologically and spiritually, there's space to explore. I like what you said. It's opening the conversation, and I think that's good. Well, we should start wrapping up here. It's noontime. Hopefully we got people over the hump on hump day, exploring Unreality. If anyone has the courage to venture into the metaverse to find Dr. Greg Bottaro, we don't know where he is. Hopefully he'll be back on Friday.
And I'm just hoping that since I came onto this at 10:59 for an 11 o'clock start, your trust in me hasn't so far eroded that I get to come back one day.
No, you emulated the Dr. Greg experience very well. he makes me anxious and shows up at 11 o'clock pretty much every episode. So, it's great. Remember I was saying before about retreat and relating to challenging experiences and as an opportunity to grow.
Yes.
Thank you for getting me one step closer to heaven.
I'm here to serve.